Hello, so as I've seen a comment from you, Shackleton, I know obviously it's actually sent out notifications to people because it's been started for about 10 seconds and I've got comments, which is good. So thanks to everybody joining, thanks for messages of support, everything like that. If you do like watching the streams, click like. If you dislike them, click dislike, but interaction is always good because it helps YouTube send stuff out. Now, you might notice it looks a bit brighter than usual. I've not got my good diffusal light set up, but what I've done is I've messed about with the contrast, brightness, saturation settings, everything like that. So it looks like I'm a bit pale at the moment looking at it, but everything is a bit brighter, so I might just mess about again with that if it will let me do it during the thing, because it looks slightly different on the YouTube screen than it does on my actual preview window. So we'll see how it goes. I'll see if people complain, otherwise I'll leave it like this. Also, it won't look as stretched now because I figured out how to set it to its native resolution again, because I think what it did before is it stretched it from being 720p to like a 4:3 output, so you know, like 480p, because you'll notice you can see further in either direction now. So it's more of its original size, so it means I can get the Lee Enfield at the top. But what I'm going to do is just try and get the webcam aiming down ever so slightly more, because what I want to do is get the Lee Enfield just at the very top of the frame, and then it shouldn't cut my chin off as much. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. That way, yeah, you've got the Lee Enfield in frame, but it doesn't quite cut me off, so I don't have to sit quite as high. Right, excellent. Right, let's go to the comments now. Cool, have you got any interesting gas masks then, Ash? Today's video is obviously on the GP9, the PPM88, which people wanted me to get for ages, and as I said, I got one a while ago, but obviously my videos are about a month in advance, so I probably got it like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Well, I keep an FM12 in my car with an Israeli filter. That goes under the passenger seat, so it's just stowed under there, so if I need one when I'm driving or anything like that, I've got that one available. However, in the house, I've got both my CT12 and my Forshida F4, or A4, whatever it's called, F2A4, set up with spare filters and a carry satchel and everything like that. So I've essentially got 2 masks set up in the house, like in ready-to-go grab kits, if you want to call it that. Yeah, the M74 is the Romanian version of the West German M65, isn't it? But it was actually built under license, which is kind of interesting, because it was communist Romania, but actually built a NATO mask under license, which is very strange. Alright, cool. Yeah, I assume the notifications did go out today, Mike, because I've got 25 people watching, you know, and I had comments within the first 20 odd seconds of the live stream starting, people saying hello, which is, you know, generally a sign that the notifications have gone out. The same to the other people that I've reconfigured the camera settings. I've managed to boost the brightness and contrast a bit on the camera, which is why my face might look a little bit purple around, like the eyes and things. And I've also got it back to its proper resolution, so I don't know if this is outputting in 720 or 1080p. Yeah, 720p is as high as this goes now by the look of it, but that's fine because it's actually in its proper resolution rather than it being, you know, like 4:3 then stretched out to 1080p or something silly like it was doing before. Yeah, an M10M for 10 quid isn't bad at all. It's just, you know, like my complaint with them is when people buy them for serious, like, prepping masks, and obviously they're not going to be any good for that. Yeah, I've not got the diffusal light set up. I've just got my, like, room lamp on there and the ceiling light on. It's just I messed about with the actual, like, webcam display settings to boost it that way, because the reason I think it looked so blue before is it had, I think it was because the brightness was quite low and the contrast and all, like, the colour saturation was quite high. So the blue coming off the screen was almost like amplified by the webcam. So now I've done this, it looks a lot more pale, obviously, because... But in reality, the room light actually looks a lot more yellow than it does on there. So I rather than looking like I'm a vampire, like I do from the thumbnail on the stream at the moment, I'd actually look more like I had jaundice, I guess, if you had the actual room colour light on. But this is good enough, I think. Oh, evening Stu. Just spotted your comment. Yeah, my favourite gas mask, as it says in the description, is the CT12, but I'm not going to bother getting it out because it's in the cupboard in a ready set up packet, as I was already saying earlier in the stream. But I've got plenty of videos on it. Do you mean a Polish MUA? The mask itself is fine, it just totally depends on what sort of filter you've got on there. Obviously, if you've got a GP5 filter on it or whatever, don't breathe through it. If you've got a modern filter on it, it's perfectly safe. So what I'm going to do that might interest a load of people, so I'll tell you all of this now because I've got a decent amount of people on the live stream. I've mentioned it on my Discord thing, and I've mentioned it in a video, but the video hasn't gone live yet. What I'm going to do, I've bought a second Polish MC1 to do the test with because of how cheap they are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pH 14 alkali test using lye on the MC1. So what I'm going to do is fill a bucket with water, put the mask in the bucket, pour some lye in, which means the water will get really hot. It goes between, I think, like 150 and 200 odd degrees Celsius when you add lye to water. It makes it incredibly alkali, so like the opposite of acidic, but you know, incredibly corrosive. And if there's any fats or proteins, it will break them down and turn them into sludge. So what I want to see is like a torture test if you know, some of the really cheap surplus gas masks are exposed to that kind of conditions for about an hour. Would the mask and all the valves survive? And then what I'll do is, before the video, I'll do, you know, like a test using the banana oil, see if I can smell through it. Then I'll take the filter off, put it in the bucket, do the test. If it looks like it's in good enough condition after an hour, I'll use our gloves, obviously. Take it out of the vat. Clean the mask off properly so it's safe to put on, and then I'll do the test again and we'll see if all the valves have survived, if the straps have survived, whatever else. Can you get fairy liquid or any other thing like that? What I personally use when cleaning masks, though, rather than dish soap most of the time, is just things like TCP or whatever it's called, which is, you know, like a mild disinfectant. You can, you know, put a tiny bit into a sink full of water, and then it acts as a disinfectant that kills germs, but it doesn't really do much else. If you mean, is that the Polish MS3 filter, or is that the Czech one? As far as I'm aware, it's alright. It's got a better particulate layer than the GP5 filter, but as I said, if it's a filter that's like 30 odd years old at this point, don't use it, just get a new filter. Yeah, I think YouTube like randomly puts them in sometimes, because I've got a button I can click for adverts, but they don't always do it, I don't think, when I click the button. I think it just does it at random times for random people. As I've said before with all the masks, if I see, you know, certain masks for good prices, then I'll get them, but if I don't see any, you know, so if they're at ludicrous prices, I won't, and that's the logic I've always used when buying masks. Which means some masks I still don't have that are relatively common, but just simply because, like with that PPM88, it took me years to get one, essentially, because I had to wait till somebody had one for a sensible price, and even then I was a bit more than I want to pay. Yeah, dzień dobry to all the Polish people, or wherever they're from, saying that. Game Ranger or Game Spy or anything like that, you can probably use Hamachi as well. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it works using Hamachi, but you need to use like some sort of third party sort of LAN kind of program to play it online now because of how old it is. German M65 is fine. If you're planning on using it though, it'll have to fit your face shape, because the problem is with the M65, it's not got a very good peripheral seal. So if your face isn't the right shape, it won't make an airtight seal to your face. It's like very funny on that. Well, eBay if you read the description, or at least that's where I get all my masks, or like 90% of my masks. Sometimes I get them from other places, but nearly always eBay. No, well, I've almost got the spear ready, because there's no point in doing it unless somebody else gets a second thing. That's why I bought a reenactment spearhead. So I've managed to shave down the extra pole now well enough that I could mount the reenactment spearhead just about on it. But ideally I want to shave it off a bit more, and I bought a plane and that came earlier, but I've not had a good chance to use it yet, so I've shaved a little bit more wood off with the plane, but I think either tomorrow or Friday I'm going to have to get the plane, use that a bit more, then I've probably shaved the pole down enough that the you know, like the spearhead actually sits tightly on the pole, so I'm not going to risk it flying off on a light impact. And then, yeah, I'll be able to, as soon as my friend's free, do a sparring video, because he's no longer working in his old job, so it means I'm able to see him more often, you know, during the daytime. So, yeah, that'll be good. But yeah, at the moment it's just shaving down that pole really, and then finding a day when we're both free to do it. But it's going to be sword versus spear for a while until he ends up buying his own bokken, you know, before it's sword versus sword sparring or whatever else. Basically, it's like petrol that normally has white phosphorus in and polystyrene. Like the polystyrene's what makes it stick. But yeah, it's kind of like a mixture of things, so it's really sticky and really flammable. I prefer rubberized NBC suits because while they're less comfortable than the charcoal ones, they don't really expire. Well, they take a lot longer to expire. Charcoal suits can expire pretty quickly after being opened. Best budget mask. Either the Czech CM3 or Polish MC1 or a GP5 or whatever. It really depends on what you can find in your area for a decent price, because sometimes, you know, the prices of masks do that all the time. You can recommend one and then the prices end up being all over the place, but yeah, I've never seen any PMK frees for sale though, at least ones that aren't like under £100. D&B Militaria. Cool. So I said this to Mike yesterday when I was watching his stream, but a video I filmed today with a friend. I helped him walk his dogs. And then I wore camo trousers and like a green over jacket thing, so, you know, I'm pretty hard to spot from another person because we're doing it in like woodland and fields. And then we did a thing where I go off and hide, and then he'd let the dogs loose and see if the dogs could find me. And it turns out the dogs are pretty good at tracking you down, so that's only going to be like a 3-minute video when it goes live in about a month. But it was pretty fascinating. I thought that, you know, you can get somewhere where a person can't spot you at all, but the dogs find you within literally a minute, you know, because they can sniff you. I like the M95, but I'd say the Finnish built ones are better than the Scott built ones by a mile, but hang on a second. There you go, it's that mask. Put it on for you actually very quickly. Nearly dropped it. Hope it didn't press anything on the keyboard that caused a problem. Yeah, so there you go, that's the Scott M95. This is the Finnish built version of it, but yeah, I think it's a very good fit mask, especially this one I've got. One of the things I really like on it is you can see the oral nasal cup's actually made from like a see-through silicone. And the reason that's good is it means it cuts off a lot less of your field of view, because you can actually see through the oral nasal cup. Whereas when you've got masks that have got black oral nasal cups or whatever, solid rubber ones, they cut off a lot more of your vision, because anywhere there's the oral nasal cup, obviously you can't look down. But this, you know, you can see through it, it's just a bit sort of hazy, your view. Right, anyway, I'll take this off again now. Yeah, my friend's dogs as well, why they're spaniels, they're like working spaniels, so they're a breed that's very good for sniffing things out. They're obviously not trained to do it, so it wasn't like he had a cloth, you know, of like my scent on it and then waved it under the dog's nose. It's just that, you know, if you're only about half a mile from them, they find you pretty easily, just like bounding around the fields in different directions till they kind of just home in on you. Yeah, I was wearing my MTP trousers and my green sort of... You haven't seen a video on it yet, but I filmed one again because I did the video last Monday. Got it from the Army Surplus. It's either a Belgian or a Dutch, like, kind of like windproof jacket, just like a field jacket thing. So it's like a dark green colour, but it's very good in terms of, you know, just being a jacket you can wear pretty much anywhere. And it, you know, it's hard to see outside because obviously it's a dark green solid colour one. But it's not camo, which I kind of wanted, because I wanted a jacket that, you know, I could wear out and about that was, you know, like military kind of built to a good quality, but not like a standout camo one. But yeah, I mean, I'd have to find music that wouldn't be copyrighted T55. That's the only problem with doing that. But yeah, that'd be good if I could do another live stream one with Mike, if that's what you mean. Yeah, at some point we're meant to be meeting up, but I think that's in the summer. But like, you know, then we'd actually film a load of videos, I guess, actually doing stuff like shooting air rifles or crossbows or whatever. But yeah, I'm sure we can sort out another live stream at one point. But yeah, that amazed me that, you know, how quickly the dogs find you. But there was one bit where I was knelt down sort of in some like reeds or like long, you know, like yellow grass kind of stuff with the, even though it was green, it breaks your form up enough. I was knelt down there, the dogs found me, and then they ran off again, and he didn't spot me, you know, so I stood up saying, oh, you got me, kind of thing. But then he was like, oh, because he hadn't spotted me, even though the dogs, you know, had come over, looked at me, and then walked back off. Because obviously, because they're so much better at sniffing you out, you know, you'd be surprised if you're knelt down with camo on, you know, and somebody doesn't know actually where you are, they just know you're in a very kind of wide area. You know, I'm saying, if it was a person patrolling, you'd have hidden completely from them, but it's just the dogs are obviously much better at finding stuff. My favourite military camo, that's a hard one. If you mean camo pattern alone, maybe Rhodesian Bushstroke. I also really like Flecktarn. I think maybe Russian SS Leto is my favourite camo pattern. But, you know, like I'm saying, it also depends, because some camos are good camos, but they're printed on like really crap materials. And that's the thing, it's like British DPM and MTP, I really like as camo patterns, but I don't particularly like the British trousers they're printed on, because although I've got some on now, they're good for the summer, but they're very thin and they tend to rip very easily, because unlike a lot of camos, they're a lot, you know, like thinner, and often, like, you know, some of the things like the zips aren't as good on them, or like the pocket ties and things like that. But yeah, like I was saying, it's actually very interesting with dogs, because like that was the thing, because like the video's called like Hunted by Dogs survival scenario. Like I was saying, it's not a properly done one, because it's not, you know, having people looking for me with specifically, you know, trained dogs to hunt down people, like, you know, like police dogs or whatever. But I was saying the reason it's interesting is because I was just surprised how well the dogs did when they weren't trained for it, and they were, you know, overexcited anyway and just running about almost everywhere. But you know, I think it goes to show that in some of these, like, you know, shit hits the fan scenarios, you know, how you'd have to be wary if there were people with dogs that are after you. Just because, you know, I think it wouldn't matter how good your camo is if the dogs can sniff you out, you know, and they're leading an armed patrol after you or something like that. My favourite rifle's the SLR, that one that's on the wall. Really wish I could have a live one, but obviously I can't because I'm in the UK. I've never done stuff with like air tanks on a mask, but it's very easy for the most part, because if you've got all the regulators, you know, and pressure things on, you're pretty much just breathing air normally. It's just you've got a air tank on the mask. Right, cheers, Cass. Or Kaz, however it's pronounced. That wouldn't work because the diameters are different, and I've already done a thing with the M10 where I've got that pipe thing attached to it. I think, Peach, if a dog was hunting you, the best thing to do would be, like, probably roll around in loads of different bits of mud and stuff like that, so you're not actually, you know, so your scent's kind of masked, I guess, because the problem is if you've got dogs after you, and especially if it's more than one, even if you got a dog with a spear, they'd be more swarming over you, and, you know, the patrol's probably not far behind them. You could have that bear-proof suit, but then you'd be a bit clumsy walking around, I reckon. You know, the Project Grizzly one. That would at least stop the dogs biting you. No, they could bite you, it just they couldn't do anything. Because it's a discontinued mask now. So obviously the price is going up because there's less and less of them available. As I said, if you want an S10 style mask, get an FM12 now. Because they're generally becoming cheaper and they're better masks than the S10 anyway. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. As I was saying just now, I was doing a thing earlier walking my friend's dogs, which was quite fun. I think you can get a lot of Cold War wool uniforms from various nations, but personally I wouldn't really want wool uniforms. I like, you know, like the more modern kind of half polyester, half cotton type ones, because they're quite strong and comfortable. Wool is going to be quite itchy and not good if you get it wet. I don't know, but the problem with snow would be your footprints would obviously show up in the snow, so I imagine that would make it very easy for people to track you. Because whenever I've walked around, like, you know, gone on a walk when it's snowy, you can see loads of different animal tracks and everything else on the paths where, you know, obviously they've left tracks in the snow. As I've said loads of times, only a prepper in the most basic sense is having like food and water preps. And I've got some stuff just because I collect surplus, but I don't, you know, plan for the end of the world or anything like that. The S6 used 40mm NATO filters. There were a couple of generations of British built ones for it. The coolest one's the one that has like loads of little circles around the outside of the filter. But sadly I don't have that particular filter. I've just got regular like 40mm NATO ones that say like Birmingham Leyland rubber or something on. Yeah, I think it would depend, wouldn't it? Because if the dogs are loose, that might work. But like I say, if somebody's got the dogs on the lead, or like they're running straight behind a dog, you know, if the dog finds you, then somebody's just going to open up on you, aren't they, with a rifle or whatever, in that sort of scenario. As I was saying, that's the thing that makes that, you know, quite scary in a scenario where you think you're trying to, you know, hide in a field or in a hedgerow from somebody. There can be bits when the person can go right past you, but then the dogs will literally lead them straight onto you, because the dogs can smell you and they're hunting via smell, not, you know, via eyesight. They tried the FOW in 5.5.6 and it wasn't very popular. It was called the FN Cow, and then they did it as the FN FNC, and the FNC's more popular. There's some differences between it and the FOW, but in general the FOW, you know, was popular because it was the best of the 7.62 NATO rifles. Or at least, you know, the best between things like production costs, amount built, you know, reliability and everything else. Originally though, it was meant to be 280 British that the FOW was chambered in, but then America screwed that up, because America said we'd buy the FOW if you do it in 308. And then when FN made the FOW in 308 instead, America said, like, no, we're going with the M14. The biggest mask I have is probably that head wound one, the Polish one, the SR1. You stretch your cheek and put the filter in. That's how you do it, same as every other cheek filter mask. Wow, a nuclear bomb, obviously, because you can't get more power than kilotons and megatons. Yeah, it's down there. I'm not going to get it up though, because I'll have to move my bin out the way and whatever else, but yeah, it's down there. Well, I'd say it'd be better just having a NATO filter, just simply for the fact you're less likely to harm yourself by breathing through it. If they're all expired, it doesn't make a difference anyway, because they're not going to work. I think that completely depends on the breed of dog though, T55, because there's some dogs that remain loyal to the person even after they've been dead for ages. My least favourite mask's probably the Scott GSR, despite the fact it's my stream thumbnail. Also some of the cheek filter masks I absolutely hate because they're just really poorly designed. No, I've rarely looked into that sort of stuff, confused parrot, because I've had no use for it. I've got a like AK mag, or it's like an M16 mag style vest thing that's, you know, just one which goes over your shoulders and then clips up at the waist, and it's got like 4 or 5 like magazine slots going across sort of lower bit of your chest. But like I said, I'm not the best person to ask about that because I don't have any plate carriers or anything like that, so I don't really have any use for them. I definitely would get a plate carrier if I found one cheap with the plates. That way, you know, I could actually set up a proper field kit on it. But I've not really had any use for them, to be honest. Do you mean the PBF? PBF for €23 isn't a bad price. I mean, you're not really going to be able to use the mask, but... No, I'll Google that. Let's see. Alright, there's a couple of pictures coming up. There's one that looks like that GP7, the GP9 I got today, coming up. You know, it's like a panoramic lens mask that's very similar. Yeah, it's an interesting looking mask, but yeah, it's like an early panoramic one, isn't it, with loads of bulk on the front. And then there's older pictures of the South Africans where they've got Mark IV and Mark V general service respirators on. Oh, I've got easily more than enough for my family. F16 out of those, but I prefer the F15 to the F16. And I prefer the Sukhoi 27 to the MiG-29. Are those the really overpowered ones in Wargame? Isn't it just a T-72 variant now? I'm sure it was fairly decent, because I think most T-72s are decent when they're upgraded past the most basic models, but... SIG definitely. SIG P226 is one of my favourite pistols. Avon M50 easily. I mean, unless if you're buying one just for the cheap practicality value, obviously a GP5, but in terms of, you know, like, which is the better mask, that's a pretty obvious question. Only if I saw one cheap enough, as said earlier. That same rule applies to every mask, basically. Nope, don't think I do. Know that. Right, I'll be streaming for about another half an hour because I'm going to do an hour stream today, unless, you know, I end up getting a really bad headache or something else, or whatever, but otherwise I'll be streaming for about an hour. Did you say you were streaming on Twitch again later, Mike? Because I think I saw a comment about that and then it got lost in a load of other comments I was replying to. I did a fun run in British Mark IV NBC suit with an S10 before, which is pretty nasty, obviously running with NBC suits on and the mask. Alright, cool, Mike, I'll definitely check that out. Centurion's very cool. You know, those end of World War II sort of 1950s era British tanks I love, because most of World War II British tanks are absolute crap, but things like the Centurion are brilliant. In some of my Wargame decks I actually quite like using the Centurion, because they're generally fairly cheap, but a bit better than T55s. You know, except for some of the countries that have the really good upgraded T55s, but for the most part, you know, it's one of those kind of spammable cheap tanks in Wargame that's quite good under certain circumstances. Tough one, I'd say probably a machete, just because it's easier to wield it. You know, for both combat and using it, but I'd say probably like a big kukri, because the thing I like about kukris is they're very easy to use and very lightweight. I have got a US Navy World War II gas mask, but it depends which mask you mean, because they had more than one type. Yeah, that's Well, some of the ones coming up are the ones I've got. But, yeah, the optical masks are the creepy ones you're thinking of. I already did a video on that, and the M50 is easily better than the M40. The only thing I like more about the M40 is it takes 40mm filters, but then you can get the Avon CT12, which is the M50 but in 40mm, so in an ideal world I'd just say that. I think the best World War II tank was by far the late war Shermans, just because they were mass producible. It was easy for the crew to get out if the tank caught fire. They actually had gyroscopic stabilisers in Shermans, but stupidly America didn't actually train many of the Sherman crews how to use them properly, so none of them used it. But in terms of being a mass-produced tank of actually very good quality, Shermans were excellent. Especially once you get past the first generations that had all like the fuel rack problems and things like that, and ammo rack problems. Basically, modern tanks have pressurized NBC systems, but older tanks required the people inside to still have gas masks and everything. I really like, well, Call of Chernobyl by far as in terms of, you know, like the Stalker mod that's got the most content, because it makes Stalker into a free roam experience. But if you mean like any of the older Stalker mods for the Stalker games, for Shadow of Chernobyl, I think it was AMK, the one that was like the really good difficulty mod that was like Oblivion Lost but not as crazy. For Clear Sky, it was just one that was like a damage increase mod, so it didn't alter the gameplay much, it just made the combat a lot more, you know, quick. And Call of Pripyat, I think it was called Redux I liked the most, which was the one that added the most gameplay elements to it. Duty out of Freedom or Duty. The funny thing is, in terms of what I'd politically align with in reality, I'm more actually libertarian, so closer to anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-communism on stuff than actually, you know, like fascism or communism. But in terms of like in Stalker, I think Duty are a lot cooler. I think T-55s are cool. Well, the problem with the Bob Semple was it was literally designed to be a, you know, like mobile machine gun platform, basically. It wasn't really intended as a tank because it didn't have anti-tank weapons on it. Well, Sweden doesn't really make tanks. They make, like, very good tank destroyers, but they're not proper tanks because it doesn't have the fully rotating turret, but they were very good for what they are, those, like, things. I like the F-14 because it was, like, one of those cool carrier-based planes, but, you know. I mean, modern German tanks are very good, like Leopard 2s and the late-gen Leopard 1s, but, yeah, German World War II tanks, I'm going to be pretty contrarian here and say they weren't very good because they were so over-engineered. Things like the Stug were actually better than their proper tanks, you know, like, you know, the King Tiger, because as cool as the King Tiger is, it was very heavy on fuel, and the Germans didn't have much petrol or diesel in World War II, because, or gasoline, whatever you want to call it, because, you know, not being able to control all your fields. They kept breaking down a lot, because, you know, putting an engine that, you know, putting so much armour and a heavy gun on the tank where the engine wasn't built for it, and not enough spare parts, because German logistics were not very good in World War II. So as cool as things like the King Tiger were, and they'd be very good one-on-one with other tanks, they were awful in terms of a tank to win a war. I'm not going to keep answering loads of the pick one or two plain things, by the way, just because it's getting a bit boring now where people are yeah, I mean, considering the odds, like you say on Mine Spartan, yes, Germany in World War II did do very well, and they held out for a very long time, but the more you look into it, the people who said, oh, Germany would have won if they did one thing differently, not really. Because Germany's main problem in World War II was just logistics, the size of the German army versus a lot of nations they were fighting, and German industrial output was just not good enough. It's like a lot of those wars. If it was a very quick, short war, Germany could have won just due to the, you know, like the professionalism of the army and the blitzkrieg tactics and everything else. But once you get a nation like that drawn into a long-out war of attrition, they're destined to lose just simply because they can't keep up the manpower and industrial capacity to fight with, you know, countries which have more manpower and industry like them, like the Soviet Union. I think there was one figure in something like 1942, Russia was making more T-34 tanks than every single German armoured vehicle combined. And that was just T-34s. When you start adding on German, you know, like Russian tank destroyers, Soviet tank destroyers, Soviet light and heavy tanks and everything else, you know, the Germans were just so screwed in comparison, because the Germans could just literally roll over them with the sheer amount of, you know, armoured fighting vehicles they were producing. Do you mean out of modern nations that has the best gas masks? I don't know, because I think some of the Avon masks are the best ones in the world, but again, lots of nations actually buy things like the FM12. They're not like unique to one nation. Well, the problem was that I think having Italy and Japan was sort of a hindrance to Germany in some ways, because Japan pulled Germany into the war against the US, which wouldn't have happened otherwise, for the most part, or it would have taken longer to happen. And again, Italy, you know, Mussolini had not modernised the Italian army by the time they joined World War II. So the problem was that, as much as, yes, you've got more men on your side having Italy involved, it meant that Germany kind of had to babysit Italy, because Italy was losing a lot of battles simply because their army had not been modernised by that point. So, wow, as I think I've said before, if Germany wanted to have done better in World War II, they'd have stuck to themselves, and they'd have done loads of things differently. But as I said, Germany really couldn't have won World War II. It wasn't one single thing. It's like when people say, oh, but if Germany had made the Sturmgewehr 44 earlier in the war, or in bigger numbers, then they'd have won. Well, not really, because they were still massively screwed in terms of enemy manpower and logistics. Avon's a British company, but they also have an American factory now, and they might have more, just because so many you know, different countries and everything want to buy Avon masks now. They've spread out quite a lot, but they do the masks they used to do all the masks for Britain until the GSR came along. They do all the US military masks now. I think they're starting to do US fighter plane masks as well, like the air masks for, like oxygen masks for planes. They provide a few US police forces and things with masks like the FM12. There's a few other European nations as well. I don't know about like South America or Asia or whatever, but there's quite a few European countries as well that bought S10s and FM12s and things. So yeah, I think in terms of individual companies, they're probably the biggest military supplier of gas masks in the world now. They weren't, you know, like 20 odd years ago. They were almost exclusively only making masks for Britain at that point, but enough other countries bought their masks because they were good and sold cheaply. What do you mean, something like the mouse tank? Because I think they did make one mouse, didn't they? Or like one or two. But again, making less super heavy tanks is not good, because it just means they're like a magnet for anti-tank rounds, and again, like, they run, you know, not very good on logistics. Most of the nations that had a good strategy was things like the Soviets and the Americans making very good medium tanks that they could make a lot of, like Shermans and T-34s, because that way you can use them in tank battles and as infantry support. You've got enough tanks that you can do whatever you want with them. You're not like relying on one tank that you hope doesn't break down, or, you know, doesn't get bombed or whatever else. That was, apparently they called it machine pistol rather than SMG because Hitler got funny about the term SMG, so they had to call it machine pistol. Although they called the ones in World War I, sorry, machine pistols as well, so that there might not be much truth to that, but because I know they had the MP18 and things like that, but I think they called them that just because they fired pistol rounds, so, you know, it was like an automatic pistol in a sense, although it wasn't, but you know. Well, America has the biggest Navy and Air Force, and the world's second biggest Air Force in the world. So in terms of force projection, America, but it really depends on what the war's fought over and things like that. But if it was a big scale war, then probably the US, but if it became a nuclear exchange, nobody would win it because we'd all die. Alright, see ya if you're off, Alex. No idea. You might find some on eBay, but you might have to go into sites specialising in World War II antiques. But if you're outside of the US, it's going to be very hard to get World War II US gas masks. Favourite book of all time? That's an interesting one. Maybe Machiavelli's The Prince. There's also lots of non-fiction books I like, you know, where if I just find a subject interesting. The one I've shown before, that one of guns, which has the section on rifles, pistols, submachine guns and machine guns, it's like an encyclopedia of guns, is very good. I don't think I've done any more cooking videos since that flapjack one. I've done a couple of videos on lye recently, just because I find that really fascinating, kind of dissolving stuff, but that's not really a cooking video. Right, I'm just going to say, can we not keep talking about different countries bombing each other anymore, because it's starting to get a bit political and that annoys me. Because I don't want any shitstorms in the comments about, you know, who would win in a war between these modern superpowers, because I find that a bit of a tedious topic, to be honest. Yeah, I know what you mean, some of the very old, like, German kind of leather masks and whatever else. The thing is, though, I'm going to stop this topic fairly soon. I'm going to say that China's been in a lot of wars before in history where they've had numerical superiority and they've lost horribly. The First and Second Opium War are a good example of that, the Boxer Rebellion. In more modern conflicts, they've fought a couple of wars against communist Vietnam and lost all of those. You know, they've gained maybe a few miles of ground and lost horrible numbers of troops and had to give up. So, as much as China is modernising and they'd be more efficient in wars, they are still pretty inefficient when it comes to manpower, you know. Well, for me, making a perfect coffee would just be my Tassimo machine, so that's a bit boring. I don't bother, you know, like grinding it in. I don't have an espresso machine or anything like that. You know, I just literally press a button and then add a bit of milk if I want to, or maybe drink the coffee black. I had 2 cups of black coffee today, actually, when I was with my friend, because I just wanted the energy. And I'm getting more into the habit of drinking black coffee now, because I think it's a bit of an acquired taste. When I first started drinking coffee, it had to be like really mild, it had to be like a flavoured latte, or, you know, coffee with loads of sugar. Then it got to the stage of liking coffee without, you know, sugar in, but still a bit of milk. And now it's getting to the stage where I'm liking black coffee, so, you know, it's getting to the motor oil stage of coffee now. They're real but deactivated. I'm not sure. I've tried Colombian coffee, which is quite nice, but I don't know if I've tried Arabic. I've tried like Arabica or whatever they call it, which is the Arabic style beans. What's the chase, that quiz thing? I have no interest in going on like quiz TV shows. Oh, in theory, there's nothing stopping anybody making a sort of NBC suit or a pressurized air suit which has like Kevlar in the front. But the thing is, in reality, an NBC suit doesn't really work very well in a properly contaminated environment if there's like shrapnel and gunfire going off. Because the moment a bullet goes into you, your suit's compromised. It's neither. This was one from, I think, either Primark or George and Asda. It's similar to the military style ones, but it's a lot thinner. As you can see, it's, you know, very thin wool compared to the military ones. So it's not a military one, but it's a military style one, I guess. I think I've got some other shirts as well, which are, you know, like military style ones, with those kind of shoulder pad type things on, but again aren't military ones. They're not totally illegal for civilians to own, but there's lots of, you know, hoops to jump through if you want Section 1 firearms. Section 2 shotguns are pretty easy to get, but I've just got no reason to have them, as I've said before. So I don't see the point in paying for a shotgun license and having the police randomly keep coming around to check up on them when I'm not going to really shoot them anywhere. If you wash them enough time and use enough fabric conditioner, they do get quite comfortable, because they don't become itchy after a while. If you use enough fabric conditioner on them, then the wool in them's no longer itchy. But yeah, that's what I was saying to the person earlier, I wouldn't like wool uniforms, because wool is inherently pretty itchy. Yeah, you can fix small punctures in gas mask lenses and the, assuming it's not like cracked all over and it's compromised, but if you had small holes going through a gas mask lens or in the gas mask rubber, yeah, putting duct tape on it would work. I've not really watched many Stalker cosplay videos, so I don't know which suit you'd be on about. Well, it's hard to say like an individual war, like overlapping like war kind of periods, you know, like a lot of the medieval period I find pretty interesting, and things like the minor proxy wars of the Cold War. But if I was to say an individual war, for the medieval period, probably War of the Roses, because that was in England, and you know, it's like the end of the medieval era with a lot of the medieval tactics and stuff being used. In modern periods, I'm trying to think of a particular interesting war from the Cold War. Obviously Falklands is interesting for me because Britain was involved in it, but I also find things like the Rhodesian Bush War pretty interesting. Used to collect Warhammer 40,000 figures and paint them, had quite a lot of Necrons. Decent amount of Space Marines and some Orcs as well, but and some Tyranids actually, but I've not been interested in it in a while, mostly because of how expensive it gets to do a hobby like that and how time consuming it is. I still like some of the 40k games though, and I like the atmosphere of Warhammer 40k because it's heavily based on Dune and everything like that. But what, you mean the ones between World War I and World War II? Yeah, there was a lot of weird designs of those, but they were mostly like designed to be very light, fast tanks, weren't they, rather than heavy tanks. Maybe the Hungarian M76, whatever it's called, the civilian mask that I've got, because it's a cool looking mask, but it's really impractical. Otherwise, probably the GSR, I would say. I quite like Frankie Boyle's stuff, but I preferred Frankie Boyle's older stuff where he was offensive to everybody. Because a lot of his more newer stuff I've seen, it's just like lol fuck Trump over and over again, like a lot of comedians did, sadly. And I wouldn't mind if he was taking the piss out of Trump and then taking the piss out of everybody equally. That's why I used to like him. But when, you know, they just keep going for Trump because he's an easy target and a lot of people don't like Trump, it wears off pretty quickly, doesn't it? Actually being funny, because they're doing very, like, politically correct, safe comedy doing that. Yeah, that question's already been asked like 2 minutes ago, and the answer was yes, they are real, but deactivated. And hello, Richard, hope you're alright. I don't know, are there any nations that trade spent cartridges as money? I don't know. If there are, then that would be the one with the most DACA currency. As far as I'm aware, there were less British casualties in World War I than German casualties, so I'd say British trenches, certainly not the French trenches. Although, you know, most of the trenches were, for Britain and France, kind of interchangeable. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't bother me to start with if a comedian's gonna, you know, like, equally take the piss out of the other side as well. But when it's like they've said, oh, this is like the safe comedy we can, you know, keep doing and it's not going to upset the BBC or whoever else and we're not going to get kicked off comedy shows again. Like I said, that's when it starts to get really just fucking boring, like you say, Mike, because, like I said, at that point, it's just like them saying the same jokes over and over and over. And it's like I'm not even offended by it or whatever, even if it's, you know, going against the political stuff I'm more into. It's just, like you say, just boring, because I actually quite like edgy comedy, or like very dark comedy. So there's stuff that can take the piss out of things that I like, and if the comedy is done well enough, I still find it funny. But when it's this really safe kind of crap comedy, it's just boring. You know, BBC in general is total crap. No idea. Well, the Brexit stuff's not gone through yet, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens, aren't we? Again, we're getting a bit political and again now, aren't we? But until we find out what sort of Brexit deal Britain gets, there's no point speculating on it. I personally really don't care. Oh, saying that, if Iron Man Spartan style, whoever asked it, there is a food video coming up, because there's my kind of food preps. Because Because some people are asking about, like, oh, are you prepared for a no-deal Brexit if you can't get food? I've done a video just showing how much food's in the cupboards, you know, just saying, like, yeah, I've got nothing to worry about because I actually stock the cupboards up. It's not a very interesting video for a lot of people, but it's one I just did simply because so many people are going, oh, have you got enough food? Have you got enough food? Of course I have. $1 T72. $1. I really like the Polish MP5 actually. It was the first panoramic mask I got that I liked, and I also like that Scott M95. Yeah, that's alright, Mike. It doesn't... When it's very minor politics stuff, I can just say to people, you know, just let's steer away from the subject again. It's only when people keep bringing stuff up again and again and again and again and again. What do you mean in terms of expiry dates? Probably several years. And that's with best befores, but I've got, as you'll see in the video, there's a mix of dry food, canned food, you know, stuff like that. So you eat the fresh food first, and then you kind of just use food rotation to go through the rest of the food. And I was saying the same thing about, like Mike said, that if you're doing it in a purely survival scenario, you don't need like 2,500 to 3,000 calories a day or whatever. You can cut down between 500 to 1,000 calories a day if you're just sitting about at home and not doing much. No, I've got no interest in MREs, as I said. I mean, if you just define as meal ready to eat, then yeah, there's loads of stuff in the house that is meal ready to eat. But I don't have military ration packs, if that's what you're saying. There are a few cool Italian gas masks. Sadly, I don't have any, because there's a lot of... Sadly, for a lot of my Italian subs, if they keep asking me, do I have Italian gas masks, it's just... Annoyingly, every time I've looked on eBay, I just never see Italian gas masks, or they're at stupidly high prices, even though they shouldn't be. I've already said the favourite gas mask I'm not bothering to get out because it's in a set-up bag ready to go in the cupboard. So I'm not dismantling all that and putting it back together. If you want to see it, watch my videos on it. That's cool. My plane came today for cutting the spear pole down, Richard, and I had a very quick go of it earlier before I did the stream and got a bit more wood off, but I think either tomorrow or Friday I'm just going to have to go out when it's light for about an hour and have a good go at shaving it down, because at the moment, every time I shave that spear pole down, I do it for like 5 and 10 minutes, get bored of doing it and stop, so every time I do it, it gets a bit closer to being finished, but at least I've got a proper wood plane now. But the thing that really annoys me about shaving that spear pole down is because it's, you know, like a rounded pole anyway. It's really slow using a knife or a plane on it because you can't really, you know, properly run it flat along it because it's not, you know, like it's got 4 sides to the pole or whatever. It's because it's a rounded pole, you have to keep going da-da, 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 you know, like that constantly. The fastest thing I could do, but I don't really want to do this now because it'll make the wood look burnt and everything, is to get my bench grinder out and then just kind of hold the pole against the bench grinder and keep doing that. Because that is technically the fastest way if you have a belt grinder or a bench grinder doing that. But like I said, I don't really want to do that because it burns the wood through friction. Now, the reason the SAS have gas masks on during a lot of the raids, especially like Iranian embassy, the reason they did that, one thing is psychological factor, like wearing a balaclava or gas mask makes you look scarier. It's also so people can't tell who they are, you know, again, like wearing a balaclava. And you can have the tinted lenses on the gas mask so it protects you from flash grenades, and it's also if tear gas and other chemicals are used in a building, or there's like smoke going off from explosions, they're not going to start choking on it. So, you know, it's like, yeah, they could wear a balaclava with like sunglasses or some sort of flash goggles on those. But, you know, the gas mask gives you all those factors combined, plus intimidation value and everything else. Yeah, if I need to do the grinder option, I'll eventually go to it. I'm just hoping I can eventually shave enough wood off, you know, using a plane or whatever, especially now I've bought a proper plane. We did have one in the shed, but it's really old and crap, to be honest. So yeah, I've got a much better plane now, and it seems quite a good tool, because I quite like the idea of having a plane for when I need to use one for whatever, but... yeah, if I really need to, I will just use the bench grinder. What, like a honk gas mask? Well, I suppose you could use a Soviet SHMS for that. Or a Shums, however it's pronounced. Well, yeah, because they can just put tinted lenses on gas masks, and then if a flashbang's thrown, it's like you're wearing sunglasses when a flashbang goes off. That's the logic behind it. The easiest way of doing it, as I've said before, is you just either put a rubber washer in it, or you get an FP5 filter or whatever else. You don't need to mess about doing a lot of that, or you buy a Chinese 40mm hose, and then normalised at both ends, so you screw the one end of the hose into the mask, and the other end of the hose into a filter. I've got an old tent, but I've got no need to set it up at the moment. Pikemen, obviously, although it's a halberdier, because they've got decent armour on, and they've got a halberd, and halberds are amazing. Drum magazines, as cool as they seem for the most part, from what I've heard, most drum magazines throughout history have never fed very well. You know, they're hard to reload and they jam a lot. So obviously having a 30 round box mag for the most part is a lot more sensible, because you can just have loads of them, you know, in a mag pouch, and then just keep switching mags. The actual OM14 mask itself does not contain asbestos, but if you're using some of the old communist era filters for it, they will contain asbestos. I've got Cossacks 3. Cossacks, funnily enough, was made by the people that made Stalker, wasn't it? GSC. I've not played the original Cossacks, but I have Cossacks 3, and that's quite fun, but I've not played it in ages. My favourite knight helmets, or if you mean medieval helmets, would either be the Sallet helmet, however it's pronounced. I think it's S-A-L-L-E-T, like Sallet helmet, Sallet helmet. Especially when it's got the bottom section to the helmet, or like the Crusader style helmets, great helmets, whatever they're called. I think they're the coolest looking medieval helmets. We've got a load of attachments for our actual drill, saying that that's, you know, got like a specific kind of like sawtooth grinder thing on it. So I imagine if I really needed to, I could probably use that at a certain angle as well. Now the M17 looks cool, it's just a shame that cheek filters aren't very practical. Yeah, sadly, having a decent vice is one of the things I do not have. We have a vice in the shed and it's not very good. The main reason is, like, the actual shelves in the shed that the vice are attached to are quite fragile, and you know, like, they buckled, I think, with moisture and heat over time. So although the vice itself is okay, it's not attached to a very stable surface anymore. So if you try and use the vice, you've not got much room because you're inside a shed with a load of other clutter. You know, you can be doing stuff and the whole thing keeps wobbling. Well, lots of rifles and machine guns are designed so you can put a new barrel on in case you burn the barrel out or it gets too hot. But I think, in general, unless you're in some really intense firefight, you're not going to be shooting enough rounds through the rifle in short succession to actually burn out a barrel properly. Well, an M17 with external filters is a bit like the Avon M50, and that is in service with America. I don't know what you're saying with that comment about asbestos. Well, if it's for general carrying use and like use as a tool and everything, and then a weapon as need be, definitely a kukri, because, you know, they're about the size of lots of bayonets and you can do a lot more with them. If you were saying like I could have one attached to the rifle or whatever, then obviously a bayonet, but I'd say kukri probably. Probably clean shaven for the most part. I mean, at the moment I'm not totally clean shaven because I need to have a shave, but I thought I'm not going to do that before the stream, because when I tend to shave I tend to get a slightly itchy face, and then I didn't want to be doing that all stream, you know, like scratching my chin and scratching my face. So yeah, once the stream finishes I probably will have a shave. Well, my favourite mask out of any of the ones I've seen used so far is the Avon FM12/CT12, so any of the countries that use those. As I keep saying, I have no interest in MRE ration packs because they're stupidly expensive when you look online to buy them. So stop saying you'd like this kind of ration pack, because no, I wouldn't want to spend £30 on a ration pack. What a waste of money. You can literally go to Aldi and buy the contents of a ration pack for like £1 or £2 for an entire day's worth of food that's MRE. Not heard of Shadows Die Twice. Anyway, I've gone for an hour now, so I'll finish up the stream. So thanks everybody, this has been quite a good stream in terms of getting a lot of actual interesting things to talk about. We veered a bit too much into politics once or twice, but luckily it didn't seem to derail the entire stream. Well, I've done a video on the M40, so watch my video on the M40 if you're interested in that. Right, see you everybody. Thanks for being on everybody, and yeah, it's been a pretty good stream today.